All right, hello everybody. My name is James Burton, and I have with me guest Griffin Puatu.
Hello, how are you?
I am very good, Griffin. How are you this fine evening? Or I guess it'd
I
be,
am.
yeah, it's afternoon where you are, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a mid-afternoon. I'm out of town for Christmas right now. But yeah, it's nice. We got some snow, so it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. So that's good.
Yeah, for better or worse. Which is accidentally a pretty good segue for our talk about location, and especially changing location. The theme we're going with here today is uh, not just moving to the big city of Los Angeles, but living in it as a voice actor specifically, what that might entail. So Griffin Puatu is both a voice actor and a director, and knowing him probably a dozen other things that I'm not even thinking of right now. Um, if you've, especially like indie games or mobile games, you may have heard of games like Shadowverse, Heroes Clash of Kings. There is a visual novel called Zodiac-Axis, which I'm part of too, and he is the cat in that one. Um, and if you've kept up with anime, the likes of One Punch Man or Charlotte, you may recognize him from those too as various roles. And Griffin is also an LA resident, so that kind of sets the theme for our discussion today. So, the purpose of the interview is that obviously moving to any major city or even just moving in general is a big step. So, the act of moving to a hub like Los Angeles, where people are known for pursuing acting, singing, directing, writing, etc., is a big step, and according to a lot of people, or in the minds of a lot of people, kind of a necessary step. So, the theme of our discussion here today is why would it be important? How could one go about doing it? What should they expect? And or how to phrase this, how can they make the most out of moving so that they don't just find themselves in a big new city and go, what now? This place is going to swallow me alive. So before we delve too much further into all these very specific questions, I wanted to ask whereabouts did you move from? Because naturally, moving from say San Diego to Los Angeles is probably a much different experience than moving from Montana or Indiana or New York or even farther out.
Yeah, so I had kind of a unique situation. Funny enough, I actually grew up in the LA area for 12 years. I went to elementary school there. Was born there, so I was very familiar with the area. And then, I guess sort of 8 years of my life, I've just moved around a bunch, whether it was for my parents' work or for college. So I moved to Boston for 2 years, Northern California for four, Nebraska for one, and then most recently Idaho. I was in Idaho for a year before I made the decision to move out to LA. So I've gotten to sort of see a little bit of a lot of different areas of America and sort of experience life kind of everywhere.
That's very interesting. You sound like the a certain Johnny Cash song. I've been everywhere, man. If I could sing, that would be a whole lot better. But it's very interesting that you've gotten to see so many different things, and I guess in a way that you're returning home in essence. Like you
Yeah, and
started.
that's definitely it's definitely what it felt like when I moved back a little over 6 months ago. It definitely felt like coming back home.
So I'm assuming not everything was quite as you left it, or as you remembered it when you
Oh
moved.
well. Yes and no. I mean, everything changes in California. It's like everything has to be new. It has to be exciting and cutting edge. So, I mean, for the most part, things felt kind of the same. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a lot of like, whoa, I remember when, and still like, sort of sifting through nostalgia. But no, it wasn't too much of a. It wasn't as jarring as I suppose it is for people who have no idea what LA is like or what living there is like.
A lot of traffic.
Yeah, a lot of traffic. Yeah.
I guess you could say it's predictably unpredictable.
Oh, it's pretty predictable. It's gonna always suck. Um, There's I mean, unless you're driving in the wee hours of the morning or late at night, it's pretty packed. You just gotta know where to navigate and how to not how to avoid all the big traffic stops. But yeah, traffic's pretty bad.
It definitely has its own culture from everything I've heard and seen.
For sure.
Yeah. So picking up and moving to a faraway place is a daunting task for anybody, but for, in this case, voice actors, why might it be important at all to move to a whole new city? Why can't someone living under a rock in the middle of Indiana, just continue to build their career there? And obviously, depending on how far they want to take it, that's an option. But why might it be important for someone who really wants to grow, to find more work, to find bigger work, to move to a city?
Oh well, you kind of just had named the biggest one. It's about growing your career. What's great about the era and the time we live in right now is that everything you just said is absolutely possible. If you're in Gary, Indiana, Omaha, Nebraska, wherever. Outside of the major entertainment markets, you can work and make a decent living, even a pretty sizable living off of voice acting and voiceover, just working from home, right? And it's really all about the work you're willing to put in, right? Networking, equipment, and getting to know people, making those connections, and getting repeat clients and work, a steady flow of work coming in. So it's absolutely possible. The question you have to sort of ask yourself is what precedent is this is my career taking in my life right now? And for a lot of young people, they're still figuring out their life, sifting through it. Making a big move like that is actually not a bad idea, right? They're maybe in the prime of their skill, and they're doing well work-wise from where they are, and they want to take the next step. So why move to LA or Dallas or New York or any of these places? Really, it's to take the next step in your career. Are you ready to start going up for these auditions for Nickelodeon, for Disney, for these big video game companies? Is that something you're ready for? And if so, then that's what I would say is the next step, because there's only so much you can do from outside of those markets, right? There's a cap, there's a limit to what work you can go up for a number of different reasons. Mostly because, especially in LA, they like people who are local. Schedules are so hectic and deadlines are crazy, so if they need to get you in the studio, they want to know they can get you in the next day, if possible. So if you think like, oh, well, I can just fly in if I ever need to do a job in LA, that's not really how it works. If they don't know you, they're not going to trust you to be able to come through for them in that way. Like, even it takes like years and years of building trust and becoming a veteran before you can even move outside the market. There are people who have done it, like Tom Kane, who's a voice actor for Yoda and all the announcer at the Academy Awards. He moved back to his home in, I think it's Kentucky. I think he lives in Kentucky. And he does most of his work from home, from his home studio. He patches in, but that's because he's in the top 1% of voice actors, of working voice actors booking these big projects for animation and video games. So he gets to do that. Most people can't. So there's a limitation, and if you're ready to take the next step in your career, that's when you move.
Right. All good points to make. Everybody kind of has these images in their head. I think like everyone who's considered pursuing voice acting has always thought, well, I'd love to be in these big animes, Full Metal Alchemist, One Punch Man, etc., etc. Or I'd love to be in these national commercials, or I'd love to be in these AAA video games. And they're all nice things to think about, and I fantasize about it pretty much every night, but there's only so much you can do from home. So you're right in that you have to identify how far you want to take it. And if you just want to do indie work, of course, that's perfectly fine. It's up to you to decide how you want to take it. But moving to a place where the opportunity is, where you can be called into a studio, 24 hours later, or 36 or 48 or what have you, however quickly they need you, you need that availability and that location.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. So it's very much about finding a place that gives you the time and the opportunity if you want to really grow past a certain level, is what I'm getting.
Yes, definitely.
And Los Angeles, of course, is one of the most expensive cities to live in within the US. I don't have a list in front of me of the actual hierarchy, but it's definitely way up there. So, that being the case, with, gas and uh, groceries and, general cost of living, what actions or precautions did you or could you take to ensure that you would have a source of income before you made the move, before immersing yourself in this culture and starting to make a name for yourself as an LA voice actor, not just a voice actor in general?
In terms of the living cost, it's really just knowing the area. And what confuses a lot of people is people don't realize how big LA is. Los Angeles is not just the city of Los Angeles. It makes up greater Los Angeles. The
Yeah.
Valley, Antelope Valley, that we're talking Palmdale, Lancaster, Santa Clarita, which is farther up north. We have farther down south, Long Beach and Santa Monica, all these areas. LA is expansive. It's huge. It's made up of tons of cities with upwards of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people living in them. And I think I looked at it the other day. LA County makes up, I think, 10 million people. I think a little bit more than that.
Wow.
But around that area. So you can imagine it's huge, and there's a lot of places to live. So I think the idea that LA is like it's not a lie that it's one of the most expensive places to live, but it's not as expensive as you think. You just have to find the areas where it's a little bit cheaper to live, or you need to find options, whether it's roommates, apartments, renting out a room or an area. It's just a lot to navigate because, like I said, 10 million people. It's multiple cities and counties that make up all of LA County. So it's just a lot of research. You have to figure out, okay, what areas should I live? Where are most of the studios? And the answer to that is Burbank. Most of the studios are in Burbank. So where can I live around Burbank that I can afford? In the immediate area, North Hollywood's not too bad. It's actually one of the nicer places to live in LA. That's not too expensive. Van Nuys is close by, but that's not as nice. But it's not too expensive to live there. And then you can go farther and farther out, but then you just have to factor in driving and traffic. Like I live pretty far outside of LA in Santa Clarita, so and that's pretty far out in relative terms, I guess. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes to drive into Burbank or North Hollywood, where a lot of the work is, or Glendale or something like that. So, but the other side of that is because it's so expensive to live out here, jobs pay much more than they would elsewhere. So if you get a job out here, where it's inevitably the majority of voice actors, we are not just living off of our voice acting income because we can't. So we have a part-time job. If you have a part-time job or another job, and it's if you find a good job, you'll be okay because they pay higher rates in terms of not just minimum wage but other jobs as well, right? So it's a lot of planning, right? If you're looking to move out here, look at the areas. What type of person are you? Are you a city person, a suburb person? Do you like to live in apartments? Can you live with roommates? Because if you're moving out here, and you want to live in the city, you likely have to rent with some roommates. Either move out with other people, find some reliable roommates, and then try and land a job before you move out here, or at least have a connection out there, something going that when you go out there, it's not like, okay, what do I do now? And that sort of answers the second part of your question. So making the connections as a voice actor when you first move out. You should not move out to any market really until you've made a connection, whether it's at a studio with a director, with an agent, somebody who knows your name, who knows your talent, who can vouch for you, who can speak on your behalf and make connections for you. You need that before you move out, whether it's to Dallas or LA or New York. Because if you just go out and you have no support system, no family, and no one in the business to help you out, it's going to be a tough couple years, maybe. I can tell you, like, a friend of mine who moved out around the same time I did was having a really rough time the first couple of months. This person booked a game, but then they didn't book a bunch for a while. It was hard to make connections, but they came out prepared as well, right? Even if you come out prepared, there's no guarantees in this industry. There, you can do a lot to work on your networking and your presentation, but what it comes down to really is whether or not the other person, the casting director, agent, whoever, production producer or studio head, is going to take you seriously. It's come out with somebody that you can call in and say, hey, I'm in town. I'd love to audition for you. That's great. If you don't have that, then work on that. And people always ask, well, how do I do that? Honestly, reach out. We're a very friendly and open community. So find a director that you are a fan of, that you're aware of, if it's in Dallas or LA, and then email them. Say an email with a purpose. Just be like, hi, hello, just want to make conversation. Email with, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm looking to move out. I'm a voice actor. Here's my talent. Here's what I can do. Demo reel, resume, blah, 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 experience. And make a connection. Make a professional relationship happen. And then work on that, see if they're like, hey, if you're in town, let me know and I'll try and get you in the studio. Then see if you can go out there and visit just to get to know the area a little bit, meet some people, network, and then you can come back home and then go back again when you get a chance. That I found a lot of voice actor friends of mine doing. They'll go out a couple of times before they move just to get a feel for the people, the studios, and where they want to live. That's the best advice I can give on both those fronts, just the living part and then the making connections work part.
All very good points to make. Sounds like you definitely have to be crafty and prepared before you go in.
Absolutely.
So there's no such thing as a Hail Mary pass where you don't think, you don't plan, you just pack up and move. That sounds kind of like a recipe for disaster.
Oh, definitely. And people do it. I mean, I'm not saying you can't find success out of the blue, but it's, that's scary because LA's, like I said, LA's huge. LA's expensive. And everybody out here is trying to make it. It's not like Dallas where, not everyone's an actor. Most people in New York and LA are pursuing the arts. They're pursuing entertainment, whether it's music, film, whatever. So you're in a huge pond with a lot of fish, and it's sink or swim. So if you don't know how to swim, you're gonna sink. If you didn't bring a life raft, you're not gonna last out in the waters for that long. So some people are naturals and can make it and can sort of tread water and make connections as they go. But that's not. I would never recommend that. I would always say make sure you have a place to live, have some roommates, have family, have someone in the work related area who can help you with your career, who can make connections for you before you move out, or else it's just up in the air, and that's not where you want to be.
Yeah, that's definitely. You definitely have to plan. But the sounds is no such thing as. I mean, like you said, obviously some people could succeed, either get lucky or just be persistent enough and make it work. But with, like you said, as many fish in the pond, you do have to have a plan and then act on that plan.
Yes.
So, obviously we've talked a bit about some of the pros and cons of moving to LA and some of the struggles. What might you say personally that the biggest obstacle to you was to moving to LA before you settled into your home? I mean, obviously there's another whole set of issues and struggles and pros and cons that come after you've moved in and you're trying to make your name. But just in the act of getting there from Idaho, like you said, to LA, what would you say the biggest obstacle was?
Well, I guess in the physical act of moving was the drive. I drove from Boise, Idaho to LA. It was a 14-hour drive, and it was a harrowing adventure. A lot of stuff happened, and it was a little frustrating. but it went okay. I mean, I went in with a plan. I had a pretty good resume under my belt in terms of indie work and demo reels and connections I had made out in LA. Before that, I had already worked with worked on some anime and been in contact with casting directors and big name voice actors, sort of getting my name out and about there. So actually, when I moved, the day I was driving down, I booked my first video game. I got an email from my agent, who, by the way, I signed with a month before I moved out, which was great. So for a month before I moved out, I had all these auditions that I had sent in, and I was able to book. I booked the day I drove down, and I went into the studio the next week after. So that was, incredibly fortunate on my part. But the toughest part, I mean, well, obviously the drive was difficult, but sort of settling in and all that is, that sort of just happens. It takes time, especially because like I had been gone for a year. I had not worked in LA since the summer before. So even though I had those connections, I had fallen out of the loop a little bit, right? It's easy, especially in how fast-paced production is, for you to fall out of people's radar and their attention span. So when you're like, hey, I'm back in town, they have to sort of be like, okay, shoot, where do I fit you in? Do I already have someone who I can call into the studio with your range? Do I, like, maybe I don't need you right now? It's a timing thing. It really is. Even if you, all the planning in the world can go to the dogs if it's just the wrong timing, right? If you're not in the right place at the right time. I mean, that's how my career started. I was in the right place at the right time. I interned at a studio that produced anime, met the casting director and producer for this show, One Punch Man, and was able to get into the show. Right place, right time. But wrong place, wrong time is just as possible, right? You can move to the wrong area or with the wrong people, or you can it's just bad timing. They're not ready for you. They don't feel they can trust you yet, or it's just they don't need you at the specific time. And all of that's outside of your control, right? But I mean, I guess that's the most difficult thing. The things outside of your control are difficult. Whether or not people take you seriously, whether or not it's the right timing, whether or not a million different variables that can show up in life. That's probably the toughest part about moving out here.
Getting set up in general and being subject to the whims of fate, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why I try to tell people, and I tell myself, just don't, like, try your best not to think about the things outside of your control. I mean, I think we're all pretty paranoid in general when it comes to communication and getting by. Especially, like, I think a lot of us actors have obsessive personalities. It's kind of why we can do what we do. But because of that, we can fixate on one thing where it's like, what if this person's not calling me in because I said something, or they don't like me, or someone said something else? Like, it's very easy to fall into that. But the less you focus on the unknown and the things outside of your control, and instead focus on the things you can control, how you present yourself, your networking, your demo reels, your acting chops. The more you focus on that, the better off you are.
So you definitely set up in advance, well, when you told people I'll be in town, or you had an agent in LA before you moved. So you definitely set up things in advance before moving down. And that's very important, yes. you would say.
Oh, absolutely. That's absolutely important. I've seen people move out here without signing with an agent, without doing all this stuff, and it's scary, right? Coming in with no connection can just be a little harrowing, right? Because now you've just got to do it. It's kind of like, getting out of college and not having a job or an internship already lined up. Like, you should senior year, junior year, you should already be interning or applying or networking with people and doing all that. The same goes as a voice actor, right? It's a business. You got to sort of start thinking early, and the more stuff you can set up in advance, the better. Like I said, I was lucky. I booked my agent a month before I moved out, got to audition for a bunch of different projects for a month, booked a video game on my drive down. After auditioning, I think 2 or 3 weeks prior to that. So that was great. Definitely come out knowing people, because it can go sour if you don't.
Kind of a bonus question. Voice Acting Mastery, Crispin Freeman's own blog where he interviews people, he spoke with I believe it was another voice actor, and made the observation that, like for New York City, for instance, all roads lead to New York City, according to New Yorkers. Everything kind of feeds in there and is kind of a self-fulfilling place. And he made the observation that LA, to an extent, is like there's LA and then the rest of the world, to where like LA residents, like if it didn't happen in LA, it didn't happen at all, that kind of thing. So he made the observation that there was an actor who played Mufasa on Broadway in New York and moved to LA to try to find work, and according to him, for the longest time, no one would hire him because it didn't happen in LA, therefore it didn't happen at all. Do you find yourself sympathizing with that kind of thing, or do you think it's do you perceive that to be very true, what Crispin Freeman said, or is it just kind of a specific thing? Maybe just he was unlucky.
Well, they're different spheres, right? New York and LA are literally on opposite coasts, opposite corners of America, and they even though they feed into each other, they are separate markets, right? New York has, Broadway, NBC, television, and a lot of stuff going on out there. But LA is a separate beast, right? So there's a bit of connection. Some agents and agencies are connected on both coasts. Some actors who work in New York, like on SNL, have an agent in LA, and they do work on movies in LA as well. But it's different spheres, especially for Broadway. Broadway, I think, is very much separate from the world of LA, because we don't really have a dedicated theater scene like Broadway in LA. We do. I mean, we have plenty of theater actors and great venues and shows that come out, but they're all usually imports from New York, right? So, I mean, for that guy to star as Mufasa on Broadway and then move out and not find work, I mean, I don't know the full story. I don't know if he had an agent, if it was just because he was shifting gears to either off Broadway to try and do television or whatever. But I mean, a lot of the time, sometimes, I mean, if he did everything right, like, he had an agent, he moved out, he knew where he wanted to move, he had some connections, and he could make auditions, and he just wasn't getting cast, or people weren't taking him seriously, that's outside of his control. I can sympathize with that, because, like I said, the LA people, like you said before, the LA people just don't know you. Oh, you were on Broadway as playing Mufasa on this big show. Great. I still don't know who you are. I don't know how you work. I don't know your quirks. I don't know you, right? It's in LA, it's very much about the relationships. Like, they want to know who you are, know you're reliable, know they can count on you, and know you're here for the long haul, kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, if you made the connections out here, or you've proven yourself to people both in not only in New York but in LA, then you're good. And I think that's the sort of the general thing to learn from that, is that you have to prove yourself. If you haven't proven yourself to anyone in LA, then you can't expect anything. Also, a lot of young actors, and I think actors in general, have a lot of expectations for when they move out to LA, or expectations from the people in LA, or what's going to happen. You need to sort of level your expectations, not lower them or raise them, level them. Like, have a certain amount of, like, understanding that, hey, some things are out of your control. Some things aren't going to go your way. Some people aren't going to cast you, but it's not because they don't like you, right? Or some people won't get back to your email, and it's not because you rubbed them the wrong way, or they ignored you. Like, there was someone, I can't remember who it was, but they posted, like, someone had sent them a message basically like, "Hi, I'm a new voice actor in the industry. I think I'm pretty good. Can you listen to my stuff?" And the person just didn't see the message. Like, they were busy. They hadn't gone through their messages and didn't see it. A week passes, and that person messages them, "Oh, I guess I'm not important enough for you, blah, 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 blah." And the guy sees this. He messages him back, "Hey, just saw your message. Sorry, I've been very busy, haven't been able to go through my messages. But now that I see what your attitude's like, I see that it's just going to be a waste of time trying to give you advice." So, and that was because that guy had expectations for how people react and made assumptions about things, So level your expectations. Don't expect anything from people, right? Don't be like, it's not an I scratch your back, you scratch mine. It's like, hey, get to know me. Like, let's get coffee, let's talk, let me see how you work. Okay, cool. Let me see what I can do for you. That's really what it's about. It's not a dog eat dog equivalent exchange, kind of like I do this, you do that. It's very much about the relationships.
Professionalism is very definitely important for voice actors. I feel like, especially with voice actors, because you hear horror stories of like these big name actors and making scenes or odd requests on film, but I kind of feel like in the voiceover world, you're on a somewhat tighter leash. Like you take off the wrong person and suddenly, you find your career sliding backward.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like you're on a tighter leash. It's just you're on thinner ice than you are in film. Right? In film, there are so many other things going on in that person's career that's wrapped up in this film. It's not just you are an actor contracted to be in this film, act accordingly, which I'd say most actors, even the big name people, are pretty respectful, pretty nice. That's how they've made it in their career, by being like that. But I mean, they're also, there's the fame aspect. Their face is everywhere. It's on cologne bottles. It's on watch and jewelry commercials. It's everywhere. So like, there's a brand. There's money wrapped up in that person beyond just your film. There's a potential. Casting Tom Cruise in this movie is going to make you money, right? Whether the movie bombs or not, or is a hit with critics or not. In voice acting, you don't have any of that. You are faceless. And for the longest time, and even kind of now, you're kind of nameless. The only people who really know who you are the dedicated fans, the producers, and the casting directors. Everyone else, you're expendable, right? If you're gonna act, big and full of yourself, they'll find someone else to do the job. There are plenty of other people who sound just like you, who are just as talented as you are. So that sort of stuff doesn't really fly in voice acting, just because, like I said, no one sees your face, so we can replace you. You're not wrapped. Our success is not wrapped up in the fact that you can make us a lot of money. Right. Our success, our money and stuff, our success is wrapped up in you doing your job and doing it well, is what it is. Which I like. I like that. I think there's an honesty to that, and it's why a lot of the top voice actors are just very nice, hardworking, good people, because they have to be. It's a necessity. You can't get away with being full of yourself.
That's a very good point to make. So obviously we've talked a lot about having to know people in LA, having connections before you move, and then, of course, expanding your network while you're there. So we do know that it's important. And what sorts of people did you know, or who did you know, that made that transition moving from Idaho to LA a little easier? Directors, fellow actors, project managers, studios, that sort of thing.
Well, definitely a lot of voice actors. I had some friends out there who had moved out there, and I also had I also make connections on Facebook or through projects. And actually, one of the first things I did when I moved out there was I made sure I called people up. I messaged them, "Hey, I just moved into town. You want to grab coffee? You want to grab lunch? You want to go to this event? You want to do this, do that?" And I did that. When one of the people you interviewed, actually, Tamara Ryan, I texted her the minute I moved out there, and we got coffee and we talked. I definitely. So I had a lot of voice acting connections, and what was important is I acted on those connections, right? I expanded on them. I tried to, become closer with them, be friends, and that's the way I think. A lot of people are like, how do I go about doing marketing? Or networking. I don't understand what networking is. Really, what it is make friends. Like I was saying, like the relationships is the important thing out here in LA. If you make friends and people like you and know you're reliable and talented, they'll want to work with you. They'll want to hire you. So that's really important. I also knew I had an agent. I signed with an agent a month before I moved out. So that definitely helped. That got me connections to audition for big video game projects, for big animation stuff at Cartoon Network. So that was great. And then I knew a couple of the producers and casting directors. So before I moved out, about a week before, I emailed them, said, "Hey, I'm going to be back in town for good. I'd love to come in for any work." And then from there, I just sort of expanded out. From my agent when I booked that video game, I made a connection at that studio. Now I'm called into that same recording studio for a lot of different projects just because they know me, they know I'm reliable, and they've worked with me before. So it's definitely a branching thing. So those are the people I knew. And I had made some connections with bigger voice actors. I had emailed a big name voice actor in the animation world a couple of times over the past year or two with my demo reel and all this. And he had sort of given me some pointers and tips, and when I moved out, I sent him my new demo reels, and he's like, "These are fantastic. I'm glad that you booked an agent. You're doing great. Perfect job." And that's important too. I mean, I think a lot of people are like a lot of people don't understand, especially in this kind of field, how important validation is. It's why the sort of master apprentice kind of archetype you see like from olden days when you were learning a craft is very much alive in voice acting. You need to have like a coach or a teacher or a mentor that you can learn from and that you can bounce things off of. You need validation. When you're doing something right, you need to know, yes, keep doing this. And if you're doing something wrong, you need someone to go, "Hey, you're doing this thing, just be careful of that. That's not really a good idea." So that's sort of what I have to say on that. That's who I knew, and those are the connections I made.
More and more I'm beginning to realize, or it's really beginning to hammer home, that it is downright impossible to really grow your career on your own. You can't just, sit on your butt at home, send demos to people and just hope that they give you jobs. You have to make friends. You have to know people, and
oh yeah,
they help you, and you have to help other people. So you have to grow along with them.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee, but if you have that mindset, even if you're working just from home, working with indie developers, there's no guarantee that they're going to come back to you again for their next project. A way you can help guarantee that or have better chances if you establish a relationship. Be nice to them. Actually, like for Zodiac-Axis, when I moved out to LA, I met and hung out with the lead developer on it for the game and made a relationship. I made that a priority to foster those relationships, because it's keeping that connection alive. If you are just like, I'm a contract worker, I fulfill my duty, I'm done, then there's no repeat. That's not a success. That's one job done, but the possibility for more of those jobs are also gone and done. And that's why I also say audition, not. A lot of people think that not getting a part, like losing out on an audition, means that you failed. It could be one of the greatest things that could happen. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen casting directors, or in my own casting experience, where there's an audition that I just love. It stands out in my mind. I really, really like it, but it just doesn't fit the character I'm casting or what I'm going for. But does that mean that I forget that person? No, I remember them. I remember their audition. I remember how good it was, how it stuck out in my mind. And I remember them for later. I make it a priority to see how can I help get them in my next project or get them another role. So yeah, it's definitely, those things are very, very important.
I remember something Tamara Ryan actually mentioned when I was interviewing her a few months ago, I think it was. One of the lines that really stuck out to me, I think it's kind of profound, one of those put it up on your wall, frame it type of things, was don't just be a voice machine. Like, don't do the job and just go home because you're just a machine, not feeling or making friends or connections. Like, be a flesh and blood human being and be a friend to these people, and that's how you grow, that's how other people grow.
Exactly, because you're not just a voice. If you were just a voice, then there wouldn't be this many voice actors. There would be one voice actor playing all, which some people would joke, there already is one voice actor voicing all of the male protagonists. But there would literally be one voice actor for all the male protagonists, one voice actor for all these roles, because they do the voice, and that's fine. I always say, talent is secondary. it might even be tertiary or further down the line. People are like, but I'm talented and I know I'm a good actor. I'm like, that's great. But guess what? Everyone else is talented. There are people who are more talented than you who are going to beat you because of that. There are people who are less talented than you who are going to beat you because they work harder. So you have to recognize that your talent is not what is making or breaking your career. It's your work ethic. It's how you act and what you do. It's your actions that make the actor. Ooh, I like that. I've never said that. It's your actions that make the actor.
I like that.
I'm gonna remember that. But yeah, definitely.
I feel like with every interview, there's gonna be like one standout phrase that might be yours. So we've talked a bit about preparing for the actual move to LA. Now I want to move the questions back into a territory of actually life in LA. So you mentioned before that you lived in LA for, what was it, the first 12 years of your life? And of course, therefore you kind of know how the way of life is there. But was there something coming back, an element that surprised you? You know, coming back as an adult, as a voice actor, trying to make connections and find work. Were there certain elements that surprised you, like something you weren't expecting, an unexpected hardship, something that was unexpectedly easy, or maybe you just saw something weird one day?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely the culture was a little bit not shocking, but it was different because when I grew up there as a kid, right? You're sort of isolated in your kid world, you know, your school, your friends, and sports or extracurriculars and all that in your family. Like that's your world. But when you're an adult, now you're in the world. You're in the it's not just a microcosm, it's the macrocosm. It's the whole thing. So really what was kind of surprising for me was just acclimating to the culture. There was an interview on Graham Norton. It was Robbie Williams and what's her name? I can't remember. A British actress whose name I forget. But they were talking about what it's like living in LA, and what they said is surprising is like LA has this thing about making you very self-conscious about the way you look. Which is in voice acting, you think, why would you feel that way? But it's weird. Like people are very obsessed about appearances, not just physical, obviously, but you know, appearances, how they appear in socially and with other people. But the physical aspect too is very important. Like I remember I was sitting next to a girl, scrolling through her computer, looking at like weird surgical pictures, and I wasn't sure. I was like, "What are you looking at?" She's like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna get a rhinoplasty." I was like, "What's that?" She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna shave down the tip of my nose so that it looks thinner." I was like, "Why?" Like, and she was explaining the process to me, and like it's like months and months of recovery and all the operation, and all this, and I'm like, that sounds terrifying. But what's crazy is, and I've only been back for 6 months, you start to think about what if I, yeah. What if I got a tattoo, or what if I cut my hair a different way, or did this or did that, or blah 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 blah. Like you become so obsessed with like these very materialistic, shallow things, and it's an unfortunate stereotype of California, but and SoCal in particular, but it feeds into that. So you got to be pretty grounded in who you are. If you're not, it's easily to fall into things that aren't great, whether it's, you know, plastic surgeries or beauty or self-image, whether it's drugs or something else, the nightlife, alcohol. Like there's a lot of traps in LA, right? There's a lot of things that you can fall into because you're susceptible to them, because it's just it's very free out there. It's all about like, what's the new thing, what's the next thing we can try out, we can test, we can experiment with. And if you're moving from somewhere very much different to that, you need to be prepared for that. You need to be very grounded in who you are. So that was kind of the shocking thing for me. I didn't realize not only how much like it was going on, but how much it actually affected the way I thought and how I acted.
It is amazing how your perspective can change when you become an adult and go back to kind of the playground of your childhood and go, I never noticed that there before. I never noticed that was a thing in this town. I didn't notice that sort of vice was there, or I didn't know that people did that. It is amazing how perspective shifts.
Yes.
So naturally, there are, when you're in LA and you're finding all these various kinds of people and perspectives, there are studios and agencies and development companies in LA that obviously would lend themselves to voice actors. But in this sea of interesting ideas and people, what else exists that might benefit voice actors, such as obviously you went over like having coffee with various people to build relationships. But aside from that, like conferences or seminars, meetings, or teachers, classes, support groups, there's various things that might help a voice actor to grow their network or grow their skills.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I can sort of just walk you through a little bit of each. There are, like I said, plenty of classes, workshops, panels, and workout groups, and like things that you can find to meet people, to practice, to get feedback, and to sort of integrate yourself into the culture and into the community. And there's tons. And it really, all you have to do is search up on the internet or find someone on Facebook, and sort of get yourself connected. There's conventions are huge. Anime conventions, video game conventions, TwitchCon. Those are actually like E3. Those are important things to go to as a voice actor, because you're not only in the voice acting industry, you're in the larger entertainment industry, and you need to make the connections across those thresholds. Sorry, my dog is barking really loudly in the background. I apologize.
Hi, Griffin's dog.
But going to those is really important. Like, I remember when I moved out there, I went to E3, and I went to a bunch of E3 after parties, not to party, to meet people. And I met casting directors, a voice director, and made connections out there. Just from going to those events. It's really getting out and getting to meet people is important. Another important thing, and I say this especially to my generation or our generation of voice actors, is take some acting classes. Not voice acting classes, not ADR classes, although those are good, but I want you to take like classic theater fundamentals of acting classes, because that is the one thing in our generation that we've lost, right? We have a lot of talented, young, hardworking people who grew up on anime and video games, and learned it from there, and I've sort of learned how to do this on the job or as they went along, but there's a limit to what you can do and how ready you're going to be to face like obstacles as an actor, like when you're in your craft. And if you don't have the fundamentals, you don't understand, like if I ask you what's your character's center, or like what what's the game in this scene? If a director asks you these questions or gives you a direction that you don't understand, and it's because you don't have any formal acting training, that's a problem. And your acting can only go so far. So take a theater class, take a fundamentals of acting, Meisner, Stanislavski, whoever, like study these people, learn it, and apply it to your acting, because you're not just a voice actor who or a weeaboo who turned into a voice actor. I don't know if that's offensive to say, but you're an actor first, right? The voice is secondary. The video games, whatever you're doing is secondary. The acting is the important thing. So that I recommend, especially for people in my generation who became voice actors because they played video games or watched anime, to invest in some formal training before you invest in the specific training.
That is very true. I think there is a trend or a tendency in a lot of people who kind of start on their own and then start trying to move into the professional voiceover field, where they can, it's kind of difficult trying to explain what I mean, but where they can emote, they can sound cutesy, they can scream, they can do all sorts of impressions, but then you try to take them, or tell them to take it down a notch and make it a little more human, a little more subtle, and they have a tendency to struggle because they're emulating the exaggerated, maybe almost comical style of that you see in a lot of anime or video games, which is a talented style that I try to get across to people. It is a style that people choose. It's not what voice acting boils down to, or it's not because these voice actors don't know how to act, so they just rely on these, over-the-top exaggerated performances, but it is definitely a style. But it's not the only thing that a voice actor should have in their repertoire.
And what you said about emulation, that's exactly what it is. Like, they've grown up watching anime, listening to these voice actors, and they know what the style of acting sounds like. They know how to sound upset and intense, or how to sound comical and kind of like over the top. Like, and they're emulating that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's how many of us learn, right? By observation, and we emulate other people. And impersonate other people or things in life. But you need to take it a step further than that. You can't just stop at the emulation. It's got to go deeper. Because like I said, a lot of the times it can sound like voice actors are doing the motions of anger or doing the motions of depression or regret, but they're not actually in it. And the reason is just because they just don't understand how to break that down, like what the fundamental root of that is. And it's really just because they just don't have any formal training, and they just need to get formal training.
So you getting to this place, and you mentioned before how it was important to have connections, and you called ahead, you had agents, you had people lined up, you were meeting people. But in the grand scheme of things, how easy or hard was it for you to hit the ground running? Were you able to start getting voice work right away, and start keeping the lights on and putting bread on the table? Or to an extent, did you basically have to start from square one to rebuild your network?
It's a little bit of all of that. No one ever hits the ground running and can provide for themselves just based on voice acting. It's impossible. I'd say the majority of all voice actors, even like big name people, aren't even there, right? They're working a part-time job. They're living with roommates or in an apartment or supplementing their income another way. Like that, there's no, it takes years and years and years to get to a place where you don't even audition anymore. People just call you in because, hey, we're doing the Star Wars and we need to do the looping. Can you come in for the loop group? Like that takes years and years of work and connections to make happen. So when I first moved out, it was a little bit of both. Like I said, I booked my first video game the day I moved out. And after that, I booked pretty consistently since I moved out here, but it's still not enough to support myself on my own, right? I have to have a part-time job. I have to live with a roommate or do whatever to make that happen because it's still a lot of, there's still a lot of work to be done, right? It's a matter of time and patience, really. Someone, I don't remember who said it, but there's a level of patience/impatience that you have to have as an actor. Like you have to be patient and understand that timing is a thing, and the more you work at something, the better you'll get, or the more you'll get on people's radar, and your time will come. But at the same time, you have to have this impatient attitude of, okay, I need to work on this now. I need to do this now, do this, and be constantly working and improving yourself. So it's kind of a balance between the two. And it's really, everyone has their stories of their struggles and their hardships, and then when things turned right. Like, I had a friend who lived out here for 2 years and was booking nothing out here, and they were getting very discouraged and very, very upset. And then they booked a lead, and then they booked another, and another, and another, and now they're working very, very consistently. So it takes a little bit, right? It's a little combination of both, and there's seasons of success and seasons of failure. So it takes a little bit of time. So I would say don't be discouraged if things don't work out immediately, or things do work out immediately and then they drop off, because that all of that happens, and you just got to sort of work through it.
Yeah, we talked. We keep coming back to no voice actor or very few voice actors do only voice acting to pay the bills, right? And that's something I've noticed of a lot of voice actors, like even the very big ones, who Vic Mignogna or Yuri Lowenthal or what have you. It's never just voice acting. There's they sing, they write music, or they're script writers, or they have like a YouTube channel or a blog or something. It's never just that. So I think kind of going over the various ways that voice actors can help pay the bills in addition to voice acting, or what they should be doing, is kind of an important subject to touch on too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, do you have a question from that?
I was going to lead up to one, yeah.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Not everybody gets, they have to build up to repeat work and being able to do voiceover full time, like you said. So, kind of my lead off question from that was, what sorts of jobs or lifestyles or approaches might be some good ways to help pay the bills in LA while building your voice acting career? Like any specific types of jobs, maybe another kind of acting sub job, if that makes any sense, or something they can do from home, or maybe they just bus tables. Is there anything that would particularly lend itself to a voice actor better than others, or are they just kind of on a level playing field?
That's a tough question because there's no real definitive answer. It's anything, right? Anything that you can find that will accommodate, that will supplement your income, get food on the table, pay the rent, and accommodate your time as a voice actor is going to be helpful. Like if you're working 9 to 5 and have no time to audition or go out to a session or do something, that's a problem. Right, if your voice acting is your main thing and what you're committed to working towards, you need to have a job that allows that. So there's nothing in particular. Obviously, there's the stereotype, and it's true. Like of bussing tables, being a waiter, getting tips, and doing all that. I know tons of actors who do that and make a decent living doing that while they're pursuing their career. There's no right answer, honestly. That and really. Like without being too much like not answering the question, but there really is no right answer. It's whatever works for you and accommodates the time and help grows your career. And there's no right answer. Right.
So whatever is flexible enough to allow you to both keep the lights on and grow your career.
Yes, exactly.
If it overlaps with one or the other, then you have to work to change something, right?
Yeah, you've got to sort of ask yourself, like, again, like, moving out there, the question is, like, how much of a priority is this to you, right? How much you're going to put in terms of, like, work and all that to really, make that a priority. And it's what it is. You have to make it a priority and understand what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're willing to not sacrifice.
All right, well, I think we're starting to wrap up, but I wanted to cover a few other things before we go.
Sure.
Just kind of an out there question, just for the sake of getting to know you in the wild, wacky world of LA. What are 3 weird things you've experienced in LA so far that you never would have experienced anywhere else?
Oh, sure. I was at a birthday party for a voice actor friend of mine, a good friend of mine. And we were in North Hollywood at this party at this restaurant on, I think it was Magnolia. And it was dark out and the lighting wasn't very good. We were sort of in this outdoor area. The food was great. And there were all these people there, who some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. But it turned out I looked at the pictures the next day and Tazon Day, the YouTuber, was at that party. I think he was sitting across from me for like the entire duration, and I just didn't know. So that was kind of crazy. Just me being around all these creative and cool people on a regular basis is something I'm still sort of getting used to. What else? Some other crazy, weird stories about LA. Let me think. What else we got? What else we got in the old tank? Let me think. Well, the traffic is as bad as people say it is. You gotta know all the paths to get to where you live and get to work and doing all that. So that takes time to figure out. But what else? I think that's kind of the only crazy story I can sort of think of. I mean, there's a lot. You know what it is? I've become kind of so desensitized to what happens in LA that none of it seems crazy. It's like, oh yeah, that's normal. When it's kind of more, it can be a little wild and out there. So yeah, that's the one story I can think of right now.
Which is kind of a crazy story. Just sitting across a table from someone everyone knows and not even realizing it until later.
Yeah, I mean, like we're all sort of working in the same industry, just in different aspects of it. So like I said, I sometimes I'll walk by someone and have no idea who they are. Like I was at E3 and I walked by Genji's voice actor from Overwatch and I had no idea it was him. I just walked by, and that's sort of the weirdest thing, I guess.
It is kind of a beautiful thing, this sense of community that a lot of voice actors have, because as we've spoken repeatedly about earlier, it isn't just about you trying to make your way in the world, it's about you helping out others and them helping out you and you growing together. So
Yeah.
that allows for these
It's
opportunities where you can just sit across the table from Tay Zonde and not even know it until later, just because
Yeah.
you guys are in this community.
Yeah, it's very communal. It absolutely is. It's very much about community and relationships, and it's very personal, which I like because I'm a people person, so I like it that way.
Right. And wrapping up a little bit before we go, do you have like the top 3 pieces of advice you might give to a voice actor who's considering moving to LA? Either a warning or just a preparation, or definitely don't do this, or definitely make sure you do this. And of course, we've touched on a bunch of those sorts of things for this interview. But does anything else kind of stick out to you of that nature?
Things I haven't said. Speaking to them, I don't know where you are in your career, so my advice is gonna. I would get different advice depending on where you are and who you are. But generally speaking, know who you are, not just as an actor, but like as a person. Know your weaknesses, know your strengths, and play to your strengths, and then play to your weaknesses. Like, sort of find ways to thrive based off of who you are and your personality and how you act and how you think and all that. That's very important. If you are very unsure about who you are, like in that sense, you're going to struggle as an actor because an actor needs to understand the fundamentals of humans and humanity and what it means to live and act and breathe and communicate with people. And if you don't have that, it's going to affect your acting and it's going to affect your networking and getting to know people and growing your career. There's that. We talked about the talent thing, but I really like to hammer home that talent is pointless. Talent doesn't matter. Talent's a prerequisite. If you're talented, then great. Now, welcome to the club. Now start working. So don't be so fixated on that. If you know you're good, like, own it. Don't feel like, oh, I don't know, blah 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 blah. Like I said, validation is important, but knowing that you can do it is also important. Having a level of confidence in your skill and who you are is very, very important. And we talked about expectations. Don't expect anything from people. And just be you're taking a big step. Like moving to LA is a big step. Make sure you have everything. Like I said, again, I don't know where that you are in your career, but make sure that you have everything in line before then. Do you have demo reels? Not only do you have killer demo reels that catch attention, that book you work, do you have an agent? Do you have connections? Do you know people? Blah, blah, blah. Ask all those questions and answer them before you move out. And that's sort of it. I covered a lot of that sort of advice stuff throughout the interview, but that's sort of just the stuff I'd reiterate on and I'd like to hammer in.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of good things in this interview. A lot of very important statements that at some point I'm certain I'll be hanging on my wall and waking up to every morning. We get a golden one every interview, I swear. I mean, we've only had 2
awesome.
so far, but so far we're 2 for 0. But yeah, it's been very good talking to you and hearing new perspectives and some very good points to be made. And I do hope that whoever's listening to this or watching this video or however they're experiencing this, they can use the information contained therein, because I think I think this interview has been very, very helpful certainly to me, and I think to a lot of other people.
Yeah, I hope so.
So that being the case, I want to thank you very much, Griffin, for taking the time out of your day to come talk to me about this thing, because I think moving to any city, let alone LA, let alone as a voice actor, which is a field so many people know virtually nothing of, is a very important subject. So it's good for people to hear more about what it's like and what's expected of them.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you once again, Griffin. I speak for a living, I swear. Thank you once again, Griffin, for talking with me, and I think this is right about the time we'll cut it off.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you very much, Griffin.
Thank you.